Well, thank you, everybody, and thank you for electing me once again. And welcome from me to the Audit Committee today, this afternoon. The next item on the agenda is the appointment of a Vice Chair. Do we have any nominations, please, for Vice Chair?
Can I nominate Councillor Higginson, please?
Second from Councillor Smith. Are there any other nominations? Can we just see then if everyone is in favour of appointing Councillor Higginson? Looks unanimous, including the Councillor. Right, apologies for absence, please.
Just apologies for possible lateness from Councillor Joe Watkins.
Thank you. The next formal item on the agenda is declarations of interest, as usual from previous years. I'm happy to take these as we go along. If anyone wants to speak up now, that's okay too. Councillor Smith. Thank you. So it's Councillors Clark and Strong on Usk Primary School, was it? Yeah. The next item on the agenda is public open forum. I can see no members of the public present, so I'll move on. So we'll move on now to the minutes of the meeting held on the 8th of March. Are there any comments or observations on these minutes, please?
Prepared to move them, Chairman.
Move, Chair. Seconded.
If there are no objections to that, right, we'll agree that the minutes are a correct record. So we need to note the action list from the 8th of March. I don't think it's a very long one.
That's on
It's about the excluded item, which I think we are probably going to come back to towards the end of this meeting. So next item is the Audit Committee annual report from 2017-2018. It's written on behalf of the committee. It's got my name on it, so I've put it together with help from the from officers. It's just a straightforward account, really, of the business of the committee over the past year. Are there any comments or observations on the account? I believe it will go to full council. Councillor Murphy.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I had a good read of it. I think it covers everything pretty clearly, and I'm happy to recommend approval.
Thanks for that. Right, looks like we've got a motion and a second on approval of the account, but I am quite happy to take any questions about it if you want. Otherwise, I'll just note that we will put the account forward to full council. So, thank you very much. The next item on the agenda is from Internal Audit. It's the report on unsatisfactory audit opinions. I'm happy to pass this over to Mr. Wathen to introduce.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. Afternoon, members. This is one of the regular reports I bring to your attention. It's the 6th monthly update on where we are with unfavourable audit opinions, which we've issued across all services of the Council. We're slightly ahead of ourselves this year in that we last issued the report in January 2018 to Audit Committee, and here we are in May, just slightly under the 6-month period. But we've got further information to provide updates, so I thought it would be worthwhile submitting this to Audit Committee this time round. So there's a bit of background in terms of the opinions we've issued over the last few years, going back to 12-13. In terms of unfavourable, i.e. either unsatisfactory or unsound, where we're assessing the adequacy of the internal control environment in the services that we've looked at across all council areas. So that there could be a range, and we're not auditing a like-for-like basis on a year-on-year basis, so there could be some ups and downs on an annual basis. And the intention is to give you an update of where we are, having followed up unfavourable audit opinions to see if there's been some improvement in the internal control environment. So if I could take members through to paragraph 4.5. In 14-15, we issued 6 reports with unsatisfactory audit opinions, and the reasons why they were unsatisfactory were issued, have already been presented to Audit Committee. If we then move on to what happened in 2015-16, we issued 7 audit reports with unfavourable opinions, some of which were carried forward from the previous year. And in the table that then follows, that gives you the original rating, i.e. the opinion, and any follow-up opinion we've had or given subsequently. And I think you can see that all bar 1 have an improved opinion, which hopefully you'll find reassuring, in that managers took on board our recommendations, they improved their systems, they improved their internal control environment, which meant that there was better financial management in that particular service provision. The one that's outstanding is Monmouthshire Enterprise Social Care. That will be picked up in this current year and is in our audit plan for 18-19. Moving on to 16-17, we issued 8 reports with a limited opinion, and those are noted in the table below, some of which have been followed up, and reassuringly 2 have had an improved opinion to reasonable. 1, the event is a second limited, and that's already come to Audit Committee, and members have invited officers in to justify the reason why there was no improvement, and the detail of that will be discussed later on today's agenda. The other couple there are due to be followed up in 18-19, and there were a number of reasons why they weren't followed up in 17-18, partly because the officers felt that they didn't have sufficient time to implement some of the recommendations that they'd agreed. The one of note there is compliance with the Bribery Act. Originally it was a limited audit opinion. When we've gone in to follow that up, that is a second limited audit opinion. So members may need to think about calling in the responsible officer to get some assurance that moving forward an improvement in that internal control environment will be made and actions have been taken to address that.
Councillor Murphy?
I think at that stage, I think that Andrew's suggestions are good when having had the opportunity of making improvements prior to a further audit and them not taking place definitely means we'd like to see them, I would have thought. So my recommendation is that we pick up on Andrew's thought there and ask them to come and see us.
Councillor Easton?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think Councillor Murphy has sort of expressed sort of an answer to my question. I was going to ask, are we able to ask any questions of this today as we leave live stream, but suggesting that we take it to another stage? I accept that.
Yeah. Chairman,
yeah, I don't know if you finished your presentation.
Not quite, Chairman,
Yeah,
not quite. Well, in terms of that question, Peter is here today, who is the responsible officer, so we could take questions, and I'm involved in that action plan as well, because part of the responsibility falls to me. It's a bit of a mixed bag, really, because this covers a corporate issue. So there are several officers from the council's point of view who were involved in dealing with the action plan. But Peter can take any questions, I'm sure.
Thank you, Andrew, and thank you again, members, for raising this, which I think is absolutely right and appropriate, given the second limited opinion that's been brought forward. And I think Andrew and his team helpfully brought this to my attention a couple of months prior to the actual opinion being reached. As Andrew's just touched on, the recommendations that had carried from the previous limited audit opinion haven't been suitably and sufficiently advanced, certainly not to shift the audit opinion that has been concluded again. I guess the two key areas which are needing to be addressed. They sit within people services and around some weaknesses around our induction process and making sure that new starters are brought up to speed in terms of their responsibilities. And also in procurement with regards to the updating of our contract procedure rules and other matters. I think the report refers to those in summary. So in terms of the matters concerning people services, that work is planned. What hasn't happened in order to satisfy and I guess remove the recommendations that are in place at the moment, they have not been implemented and acted upon. So the work is programmed. It just hasn't been concluded at the time the opinion was drawn. And similarly with matters concerning procurement, and just to give a little bit of background and context in terms of procurement. So I picked up procurement as part of my widened portfolio and brief probably about 12 months ago now, probably just slightly less than that, when there was some slight adjustments to some of the senior leadership roles and responsibilities. The head of service who's responsible has, and under my direction, focused on matters concerning the corporate landlord, and that's making advances around estates and property services, and some necessary focus and attention in and around that. In terms of procurement, and I guess members who are well versed with some of the work that we've done around the budget, procurement and procurement savings have taken the fore. You may be aware of Economy and Development Select Committee's focus and workshops that have been run around procurement. So we've been investing a lot of our time both in supporting the work around the procurement savings, the work around members with procurement there. But important to note that in the steps forward with regards to procurement, we will very shortly be bringing in front of Council a procurement strategy. That's something that has not previously been endorsed and approved by Council, but it is necessary that it is. There's still I've had a substantive draft of that, and we are currently at this moment working that through at the moment because it requires some further refinement and revision. And what will come out of the back of that strategy is a programme of work. I will be looking, Andrew can confirm this because it's cited in the management responses to the recommendations around the work around procurement and updating our contract procedure rules, etc. That we will be looking to do that, but as part of a programme piece of work in taking forward steps to improve procurement in terms of compliance and process within the business, procurement savings, and also delivering some of those wider benefits around procurement as well. So it really is a case of, I guess, me looking to work with my heads of service and our teams to prioritise work accordingly. So coming back to the limited opinion, I will be looking to address that in the forthcoming period. It's just a matter of timing on my part as to when it gets done.
If we were to ask the responsible officer to come in and answer questions, would that be you or someone else?
I can provide a fuller and more detailed update, but it would probably be better placed for the respective heads of service, covering both procurement and people services, to come in and respond.
Well, I think the issue then, Councillor Eason.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So we are talking here about compliance with the Act as opposed to allegations of bribery, I take it. Thank you.
I think that nod was a yes, but
Yes, Chairman, it was.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not sure now what the mood of the meeting should be. We've had assurances from Peter Davis that he's taking this forward. I think it's pretty straightforward that we would be asking the responsible officers in. I wonder if this is a case when we would just like a progress report on the implementation of the Act and what the implications are. So perhaps we could invite someone in to give us a briefing, and we'll ask them some questions. Would that be a good idea?
Could I ask Peter how long he thinks would be appropriate to get to a stage where we can have a meaningful look at it? Because you don't want to make it for a time scale that officers can't deal with, particularly with the summer coming up.
Do you have a view on that, Peter?
Yeah, I think it would be reasonable. I think can maybe the clerk confirm when the next meeting is, and I can probably offer a view on that.
We've got a meeting in July and then one in September. It's early July and then 5th.
Okay, rather than offering a view right on the spot, given it's early July and lead-ins in terms of agendas being dispatched, if I could just liaise with my heads of service, and in terms of it goes back to Councillor Murphy's point, I'd want to be in a suitable place to be able to provide both the progress update report and provide the comfort and reassurances in coming back to the point of discussion here around the limited audit opinion. So I think July might be doable, but let me just check that. Failing that, certainly September.
Well, that seems sensible to me. If we're all in agreement on that. Okay.
Chair. 19th next one's the 6th of July, and the following one's 19th of September. The agenda says something different than what the diary is saying, I'm told.
Right, we've got 5th of July on the agenda here. Yeah, I'm sure the dates can be confirmed, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be July and September. Okay, we'll leave that there then. That you're going to let us know when it'd be appropriate for some officers to come in and brief us on compliance with the Bribery Act. Because I think we are interested in general progress and what needs to be done and what the purpose of it is. So thank you very much, both of you.
One question
Yes,
about-
Councillor.
Sorry, Chairman, sorry. Can I finish the presentation?
Yeah, sorry.
I haven't quite got to the end yet.
Yeah, I'm perfectly happy for you to give us more information. Yes.
Right, okay, sorry members. Just picking up on where I left off in terms of 17-18 reports. We issued 8 limited opinions, and they're in the table on 4.12. There's no revised opinion because we haven't yet followed them up. They have been booked to be followed up in 18-19, so the current audit plan, which you've approved the draft of. If we go down the list, the Borough Theatre Trust has been previously reported into Audit Committee. Raglan Primary School, previously reported. The Youth Service, the key issues there were key concerns. The management and cash handlers were unaware of non-compliant with the authority's financial regs and procedures, inappropriate sign-off of grant claims, some personnel issues, and a separate bank account being set up outside of our normal arrangements, and a lack of approval, risk assessments, etc. for trips. So that kind of accumulated in us giving a limited opinion. The event follow-up has previously been discussed and will be discussed later on the agenda. Then there were fuel cards, as members can see, there are 4 bullet points there, issues around not tendering for the fuel card arrangements, no signed contracts in place, no evidence of the ordering of fuel cards, confirming budgets, etc., and very little monitoring to ensure we were using effective fuel stations and i.e. value for money. Moving on to food procurement, a number of issues there, but a bit piecemeal across the whole authority, with no one person in overall charge of procurement, so several contracts probably overlapping. There was inconsistent knowledge of what contracts we had in place. There was off framework spend, and there was, in some cases, no documentation to demonstrate that they've gone through a proper process. And so there's a lack of awareness about performing the appropriate vetting due to due diligence on food suppliers. Very few contracts were in place, and as I say, lack of evidence in the case of off-framework spend. Health and safety, no health and safety overall strategy in place. There needs to be further evidence of a training needs analysis regarding health and safety across the organisation, and reportable incidents were not always escalated to the HSC in a timely manner. and then we've talked about the Bribery Act already. So just to reassure members, one of our remits within the internal audit is to assess compliance with policy and procedure to ensure public money is spent appropriately, and we've picked up these issues, and therefore we've deemed these particular audits to be unfavourable with limited assurance. There are 8 out of I think about 35 opinions we actually issued, to put that into context, but we have included these as follow-up audits in our 18-19 audit plan, and we'll be reporting back to Audit Committee in terms of progress. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Yes, Councillor Easton.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I noticed the Scully Finn is mentioned in the report. I understand the matter's closed, but I'll still declare a personal interest in that matter. The other question is regarding the youth service. You say the existence of a separate bank account outside MCC arrangements, etc., etc. Is this a historical problem, or is it something new? Because I understand the youth service groups run independently with their own accounts some while ago. Is this a fallback to then, or is it something new?
Thanks, Chairman. This is something which is completely separate from those individual groups. So it's been set up historically, but it's come to light when we did the audit that it didn't go through the proper channels in terms of having its own bank account set up.
Well, I think on these new limited assurance reports, we would be content for internal audit to go back to them and report back again and let us know whether there's been any improvements. I'm happy with that if everyone else is. Yes, Councillor Higginson.
Yeah, just one question in relation to the fuel cards. It's only something I've seen elsewhere, and it's in relation to cars rather than anything else, and maybe vans and sometimes lorries. But when our vehicles are filled up at a service station where the card is presented, are the mileages checked then? Are they asked for and checked?
They should be, but that's part of the monitoring process, is that they're not routinely. So I can't say 100% are checked, and we can't say 100% that all that information is provided.
Could I follow up with that? And is that something we could implement?
It's certainly a recommendation we've made in our report to the manager who's managing that fuel system process. It does come down to the reliance on the users of the fuel cards to make sure they're compliant. I suppose the ultimate would be to withdraw the fuel card if there's non-compliance. That could cause some other complications if you're driving a council vehicle. But we're quite keen to talk with the manager to make sure that they emphasise the conditions of using those fuel cards with all of the users.
Thank you for that and for your answer.
I find it quite astounding that Councillor Higginson's raised this issue with the fuel cards, that you're saying, well, they should do, but they may not do. I'm sorry, there's a requirement they must do, and if the manager can't even cope with such a simple direction to his staff, we've got an issue. I'm reading this report and I found it amazing, sort of the health and safety. Well, we don't have a health and safety strategy in place. I find that absolutely astounding. I've always assumed that these things ran ordinarily, but the fuel card one, no, it requires to be done and it should be done, and if it isn't done, there has to be some action.
I think we all agree. I think the point of the internal audit and the committee is to keep an eye on these things.
We need to see something happen.
Yes, and it's not for me to say what management is doing, but I think we have had an assurance from the head of internal audit that the procurement card thing does come into the recommendations that have been made and will be followed up.
Yes, Chairman. Yeah, as part of our process, we will follow up. An action plan's been agreed with a particular manager who runs fuel cards, and we will follow that audit up in 18-19. So we will recheck we'll go out and we'll retest and come back with responses to Audit Committee. If at that time there's been a lack of response in terms of managing that and monitoring those fuel card processes properly, we'll be reporting that back to Audit Committee as well.
Councillor Easton.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. In respect to the two questions by two councillors at the front, are these for private cars, or I read this as being a corporate system? Are they for private cars, or are they within the council's own fleet, for example?
Yeah, we wouldn't give a fuel card for a private car. It's part of the council's fleet.
Chairman, just for clarity, I just cited about cars and that I happen to see, like, what do you call them, these people who go around the shops and things. No, but I was talking about, I see our PT unit, but buses in various places, and that's the reason I mentioned.
Can you turn your microphone on, please?
Sorry, Chairman. As Mark said, 99% of fleet vehicles. There might be the odd occasion, I think, historically in youth in particular, the fuel may have been used for a private vehicle, but that is an exception. Majority are fleet vehicles, including the PTU buses as well.
Yeah, Councillor Higginson mentioned PTU. PTU is quite an interesting one for me because actually the extent of use of fuel cards is probably not what I would have anticipated using. We have bundled stores for things like diesel and fuel that we actually get at preferential rates. It's more preferable for them to actually think ahead and use and fill up at the depots and the garages at the council's facilities rather than necessarily garages out on the roads. So in those circumstances, I would suggest that the fuel cards need to be more of a backstop position.
Just a reflection from me. We've been alerted to some limited opinions in a number of areas, and it is certainly down to the committee to decide if they want to call someone in at this stage. I had earlier thought that we might be content to wait until internal audit had followed up those reports in a future report, but I would just like to emphasise that if the committee wants it, we could call in managers for these areas. Yes, Councillor Murphy.
Without saying too much, Chair, can I suggest that we reconsider that in, say, September, because there's things going on that perhaps it wouldn't be the right time to look at it now. So I don't want to expand on that.
All right then, okay. So the recommendation was that we note the improvements made by service areas following the audit opinions issued, but I think the second part applies that we are concerned, and we've made a resolution that we're going to ask for further evidence from managers about the Compliance with Bribery Act coming from this discussion. And I think we're looking forward to when internal audit come back to us, probably about this time next year, on what further progress may have been made in regard to the current unsatisfactory reports.
Yes, Chairman, it will be hopefully within 6 to 12 months we will be reporting back. We've got an obligation to do the follow-up within 6 months, but it depends on timing of when the reports come to Audit Committee, but definitely within 18-19, yeah.
Just one final thing from me. I'm looking at the chart at 4.3, and the number of unsatisfactory reports 12, 13, 13, well, none in 13, 14, 2 in 12, 13, then 6 in 14, 15, 7 in 15, 16, and 8 in each of the last 2 years. I'm not sure if I detect a trend there, but has the checking become, has the internal audit progress become more onerous, or are there more problems than there used to be?
The checking is the same, Chair. We comply with our professional standards. We do prioritise what we look at over the years, but it's difficult to compare on a like-for-like basis because we're not auditing the same things every year. I think from the audit plan, you'll see we've probably got a population of 1,000 particular services we could audit, but we try and audit those over a cyclical period. So it does look like a trend, but we can't say definitely that there is a trend.
Thank you. Just one more thing, is maybe it doesn't directly come from your paper, but a peer review of internal audit carried out by Port Talbot has been received, has it not? Will the committee be seeing that?
Yes, Chairman, that's in relation to the public sector internal audit standards, which we've mentioned at Audit Committee previously, and yes, I'll be reporting that separately to Audit Committee, either as a separate report or be tagged onto my annual report, which you'll receive in the next Audit Committee's meeting.
Right, thank you. Thanks very much. I'll move on then. The next agenda item is was going to be the annual governance statement. I believe this isn't yet available, is that right?
Yes, Chairman, my apologies. The actual annual governance statement is not yet in a format which I felt was appropriate to present to Audit Committee. So if members are in agreement with, and Chairman is in agreement with, I'll make sure it's done and dusted within the next week or so, and circulate to members within the next fortnight, so they've got an opportunity to comment before you see it within the draft set of accounts.
I think in the circumstances that's a very good move. It's quite a lengthy document for anyone who may not have seen it before, and it is worth looking through, and we'll take it formally next time when people have had a chance to read it. Thank you very much. The next item is a paper which has also recently become available, the implementation of internal audit recommendations. It's another internal audit report. I knew that there was a problem in viewing some of the charts in this report. I believe that some copies have been made available and passed around, but I'm just going to hand it over now to the Head of Internal Audit to introduce.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. Following on from the previous report, this goes into a bit more detail, I guess, in terms of how we arrive at the opinion. It's based on the number of weaknesses and strengths we identify on each particular audit. And where we identify weaknesses, we put together an action plan of recommendations, which the service manager then agrees to implement, which then helps to improve the overall financial environment and internal control environment. So this is a report to Audit Committee to give you an update on the progress of implemented, agreed audit recommendations within the service areas. In 2015-16, 97% of our audit recommendations were agreed by operational managers, and in 16-17, 96% were agreed. So what we're saying is that we've identified a particular issue or a weakness in the audit we've undertaken. That results in a recommendation being made to the service manager to improve the situation, and in 96% of those times, the manager has agreed to implement that particular recommendation. So then we go and double check to make sure that those recommendations have been implemented, and what we've looked at is anything that's been finalised for 16-17 to 2016-17, and within the appendices and the graphs, which some have come out and some haven't, so apologies for that. It shows that of the 25 audit jobs where we issued an opinion in relation to 16-17, it related to 127 audit recommendations in total, 87 of which equates to 69%, have actually been implemented. 25 or 20% had not been implemented, 7% partially implemented or were ongoing, and then 5% were no longer considered relevant for whatever reason. So the papers below then just put that into a more, hopefully more readable format. We've given some information about what we class as our opinions in the description in terms of level of assurance, the individual risk rating. So 1 is a significant risk, and there's a definition of that within the appendix. And then moving on to Appendix B, that gives a graphical representation of what I just talked about, in that 87 out of the total 127 audit recommendations have been implemented and 20% have not been implemented. So when we break that down a little bit further, on Appendix C, that identifies the individual audit jobs where we've made recommendations. And as you can see in the third column along, that says not implemented, and that comes down to the total of 25. So you can see where our audit recommendations have and have not been implemented. The two areas which stand out there are car park income, where 5 recommendations out of 10 have not been implemented, and outdoor education, 4 out of 11 recommendations have not been implemented. So the next graph on Appendix D hasn't quite come out, unfortunately, so I'll need to recirculate that to members. That identifies which of the significant recommendations, so the high risk recommendations, have not been implemented, and there were 3. There were 3 significant audit recommendations which were not implemented. And again, I'll circulate this to members, but 1 related to outdoor education, 1 was in our benefits area, and 1 was in community meals. So there's a bit more detail about which service areas are not implementing those recommendations. There's a management comment with all the actions and recommendations we put into the action plan, but for reasons known to those managers in particular, those recommendations, although they were agreed, weren't implemented by the time we followed them up. And Chairman, I'll provide details to all members outside of the meeting, because that graph didn't come out properly within the papers, unfortunately. Then moving on to the next appendix, Appendix E, that just breaks it down per directorate, and that's the paper I've just circulated. It does show you the graph of our 5 service areas and directorates, the number of recommendations that have been made, and any that have not been implemented. And it just as a quick scan through, children and young people, 8 out of 55 have not been implemented. Finance is 4 out of 8 not implemented. Leisure, 3 out of 6 not implemented. Operations, 8 out of 40 not implemented. And social care, 2 out of 18 not been implemented. So that's the data per the report, Chairman. I think I'm happy to answer any questions, and if members want any further details about that information, I can certainly provide it.
Okay, I'll throw it open to questions and observations. Councillor Easton.
Thank you, Chair. On Appendix C, Andrew, you had 11 implementations for refuse and garden waste. They were all implemented. There's a fair number. What was the relevance of the implementation requirement? And the second question is regarding county farms, where you had 6 questions. 1 is ongoing, 2 partially implemented, and 1 is no longer relevant. Could you answer those 2 questions? It's on page 8 of your report, Appendix C of your data list.
Not easily, Chairman. I haven't got the detail in front of me, unfortunately. I could provide that in due course. That's the data that compiles the information that's been provided. It's in the detailed report of those individual audits. So I'll have to get back to members on that one.
Councillor Murphy.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Can I just get some clarification? I mean, Andrew, of the ones not implemented, were they the ones that had been agreed by the manager in advance and then not implemented? So they're within the 96%?
Yes, Chairman, that's right. Yeah, so they were agreed recommendations which have not subsequently been implemented.
Yeah, and what follow-up have we managed to do with regards to asking why they haven't been implemented? Because I see the odd ones ongoing, but there's not many.
I think that's a fair question. If the overall opinion was unfavourable, then, as already mentioned this afternoon, we would pick that up in our follow-up review. Where the opinion was probably more favourable, then we do a kind of 6-month sweep of where we are in terms of the recommendations that have been implemented, and these get carried forward into the following year as well. So they're still on our data collection information, and we do chase managers, but it is quite time consuming to do that. But we are on the case with that, and where there are any issues, if members are concerned, I can bring that back to Audit Committee if you feel that's appropriate.
Councillor Smith.
A comment that I find it amazing that if recommendations have been made and agreement is by the manager, that they're then not implemented. I mean, the whole purpose of audit is to make the council more efficient, isn't it? And to achieve the best outputs or whatever for our taxpayers. But here you have a department that it says with limited resources. They're working hard, they're bringing recommendations forward, and to me it seems a lot of people are just ignoring what they've agreed, and I find it an amazing situation.
I agree, Chairman. You know, I mean, our responsibility is to report that to you as Audit Committee. We report it through to SLT, and in terms of our final reports, they go to all heads of service as well. So there's an awareness of what should be done. What we then do when we follow up the reports, which could be 6 to 12 months later, once those reports are finalised, they go to heads of service as well. So there's a responsibility within the directorate to make sure that those actions are implemented. But as you can see, some are not implemented, and there might be a justifiable reason for that, but in other cases there may not be a justifiable reason. But our remit is to report that, to chase service managers and operational managers to make sure that they are implementing them, and if we feel they're not implementing them, we escalate that through to a more senior management.
Can I ask, Chairman, as presumably senior elected members are aware of and involved in the process somewhere along, that they can actually assist the audit department in getting actions?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm just I'm in the middle. So I'm just in the middle of actually penning an email to Andrew as we speak. I think something I need to probably assist with, I think, in terms of liaising directly with the relevant heads of service, and in terms of progress needing to be made. And I'm reflecting really on both reports that the Audit Committee have just seen sight of, both in terms of those with unsatisfactory audit opinions and equally in terms of where recommendations haven't been implemented. So let me take that out of the meeting with Andrew. I will look to liaise directly with those relevant heads of service and escalate it accordingly. And it may require me just having a conversation at our leadership team meeting, just to actually make it known to them, because whilst members of the senior leadership team and chief officers will see individual reports relevant to their areas and over time, I think it's probably necessary and helpful off the back of the information that's been compiled for Audit Committee for them to see it at a macro level and for them to take the collective responsibility in taking action.
What we've been able to do before is where there was a seemingly highish proportion of recommendations not implemented, We've asked the relevant managers to come in and talk to us like the Children and Young Persons did last year. I think maybe because of the difficulties in the reproduction of the report this time, I found it difficult to identify areas which may be of concern at this stage, but I noticed that we've got only half of the recommendations for finance seemingly implemented. That doesn't include the car parking, does it?
No, Chairman.
It doesn't include that. It's just that that was an example of why things are sometimes not implemented, because when we had the managers from the car parking come and talk to us, it was a lot about new equipment being ordered and it not being worth bringing in the changes until the equipment was available. I don't know if that's outstanding now or not, but that was an explanation. So we've got an issue here with finance, which seems to be at least a high proportion of the few recommendations not implemented, and also leisure is looking to be a high proportion not implemented. Now, I don't suppose we have any more information on that at this stage. Can anyone help on that?
Chairman, I haven't got the detail of that, apart from Appendix C shows the individual jobs which we're talking about. So that breaks it down. What we need to do is just make sure that probably another column on that spreadsheet would be more helpful, is to actually record which directorate those particular jobs relate to, and then that would be more meaningful, I think, Chair.
Because we don't have I think it's Table C gives the individual work areas, but it doesn't give the seriousness of the issue. So you don't know whether the things that are not being implemented in a particular area are serious or not. So that might be helpful anyway as a first stage in deciding what our attitude to these reports is. Mr. Howcroft.
Yeah, I'm just conscious that my discipline is accountancy, so I don't take responsibility for all of finance, but just looking down that list, there are 4 audits that related to finance: the aggressive system, the benefit system, sundry debtors and treasury management. Of those 4, 3 of those only had one aspect not implemented. I know there's been quite a lot of systems changes around Aggresso, moving to a different platform. I will find out the details for you because I'm interested to know myself from a finance perspective as to the reasons for that. But I suspect it's more often than not a pragmatism to not bring new controls in, which will be automatically sorted by changes in the versions. Yeah.
Yes.
Chairman, just picking up on your point about the seriousness of those not implemented, what I said previously was that there were 3 significant recommendations which have not been implemented, and I would provide Audit Committee more information about that. I can obviously improve the report next time round to make sure that's included within the report. It was just a bit comprehensive in terms of all the information, but I can give some headline figures. But they related to one issue was in benefits, one issue was in outdoor education, and one issue was in community meals. So the higher risked recommendations were not implemented in those 3 areas.
Thank you very much. Well, if the committee is content at this stage, I think it would be useful to have that further information highlighted, and then we can think whether we want to ask any further questions. But if the committee is satisfied at this stage, I'll just note the recommendation. If I can get this ancient-looking laptop to work. That we consider the report and identify any concerns with non-implementation of recommendations where appropriate. Consider calling in any managers. I think we've discussed around those issues. So I think we can say that we've accepted the recommendations.
I think it must be incredibly frustrating to work in an audit department and not see things happen. You have my sympathy.
Yes, and also possibly it's a good thing to see things happen, but yes. Right. Thank you, everyone. The next item on the agenda is the forward work programme. Officials have provided us with a skeleton work programme, I think, for the coming year. Do I have any comments and observations on that? If not, we'll just note it then and move on. The date and time of the next meeting, it says 5th of July. Are we sure about that? Yeah, 5th of July. It's a Thursday, yes, that'd be the right date. So we note that. It's going to be 2 o'clock, I presume? Yes. Yep. Okay. So we're moving on then to item 14, which is to consider whether to exclude the press and public from the meeting during consideration of the following items of business, which of course is to do with the events review. So I think we've...
Move that's done, Chairman.
Yeah, I think we've seen this exemption before and accepted it. So at this point, I'm going to ask the Secretary to stop the broadcast.